morning, and thank you very much, not only for joining me this morning, but also for allowing me to come out and spend some time with you in the field, which really helped me to get a feel for the working life of a behavioural ecologist, and especially to get lots of information about pied flycatchers. So thank you very much.
No, it was great. I mean, it was quite a while ago now, and I know that you know, right in the middle of the field season, it's you know, it's quite intense. When your initial request came in, and of course I didn't know who you were at all, and I thought it was an old friend of mine who does play these kind of elaborate games, and you know, I remember once he made up an email address and went through this kind of elaborate kind of prank, and I thought that was the case here. So I think I initially didn't reply, and then you emailed again, and I did reply that time, and then of course, you know, I realised that it was actually real.
Yeah,
so it really didn't happen.
I thought that was funny, and I think that probably ended up informing the Odd Bird more than you might imagine, because I think, you know, one of the things that Simon does in Odd Bird is he gets very used to the fact that people don't take him seriously. I think that was probably coloured or flavoured partially by your reply, and me thinking, I wonder if this is what it's always like. I think I'd probably been writing, when I reached out to you, I think I'd probably been writing for about 6 months, something like that. And I came across you somehow. I can't tell you how excited I was to learn that there was somebody who was running. I think I'm right in saying that you were at the time running the UK arm of the European pied flycatcher network. Is that correct?
Well, that's kind of true. So there's a whole network of academic researchers, mostly across Europe, that study pied flycatchers for one reason or another. And yeah, after my PhD, I've been involved in monitoring nest boxes at this population on Dartmoor, but close to where I live. In fact, I can see it out my window here. I still live right next to this reserve. And yeah, and I was involved in monitoring nest boxes there from in my early 20s. This is before I had any science qualifications even, actually. I always had an interest in birds. And this data had been collected there since the 1950s, obviously sort of long before I was even born. And after my PhD, I took it upon myself I realised that my PhD made me realise the value and the wealth of information here, which nobody had really used for anything. So I took it upon myself to computerise all this data that was in box files in the office there, and I was kind of trusted to compile all this, and I ultimately shared it with these other groups, and effectively became UK data point, if you like, in lots of pan-European bits of research on pied flycatcher. Which,
you know, they look forward to the day that we spent together, partly because it was going to be so important for the book. I'd fallen in love after reading the Alatello, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but Alatello and Lundberg, after having read their monograph and after having read the papers and various bits and pieces, I was so curious just on a personal level. So it was yeah, it was a brilliant experience. So
yeah,
so thank you. Yeah, really enjoyed it.
And you came right in the thick of the action. I mean, I would have arranged a tape, you know, to maximise your experience, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, I
yeah,
remember, you know, you capturing a female, and you know, you got her out of the nest box and showed her, and you know, release her, and he showed me how the nest boxes worked, and you know, I got up and got into the nest boxes myself and stuff like that. It was yeah, it was a wonderful experience. And some of those little, as I read back through Odd Bird now, I mean, I remember you kind of using your jumper or whatever in a way to prevent the bird from getting out, and that's written into the novel.
It is written in. Do you know what? I don't do that anymore because I've become more. I suppose I've become better at taking them out of the box without them escaping.
You talked to me about weasels and climbing into the nest boxes and eating the eggs, and of course, there was the incident where Charlotta, a weasel makes her jump and the ladder falls back and all that kind of thing. So lots of little things that you said, which were probably throwaway, which I also thought were throwaway at the time, and I'd got no idea that they were going to be useful.
Yeah,
kind of became useful. So that day was such a valuable day.
Yeah.
So,
You remembered it very, very accurately, actually, as well. It could, that scene you just mentioned in the book. I could obviously, I was reading that. Obviously, I knew that was very much based on the day you had with me. So
you could tell that
very accurately. Yes, no, I was yes, absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
I was always wondering what was coming next, not just for the the obvious reasons as the storyline in the book developed. But I was also wondering, what else? What else did I share with Lee? What else did I say?
No, you didn't say anything incriminating. Obviously, it was just all interesting. It was very interesting. So, about the pied flycatcher. So there's a European pied flycatcher network. Lots of people, and they don't do that for every bird. I mean, well,
No.
I guess there are a number of species which are investigated and have been investigated intensively. But I mean, people have been studying the pied flycatcher since the 1950s or whatever, or earlier.
Yeah, for 40s. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a bird that, most people in the UK, probably a lot of people in the UK haven't heard of, right?
Sure.
Why is it studied so much?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of reasons, really. I think one of the reasons is they're actually very easy to study because, as you saw when you came round, they nest in nest boxes. They prefer, if nest boxes are there, they will use them in pretty high densities, and as you saw when you came out as well, they're pretty easy to monitor and to catch. There's about 250 nest boxes in the wood that you visited, and there's 60 pairs in those boxes. They're quite high density, so it enables researchers to study them with great ease, really. The nests are followed all the way through from when the males arrive. You can check them regularly enough to look at when they start nest building, when they lay their first egg, and how many eggs they lay, and how many hatch, and how many fledge. Very easy to catch the adults, to mark them and take measurements and things, and the same for the young. So they are easy to study in that sense. So the other birds that are well studied across Europe anyway are other, like blue tits and great tits, which are boxes, which is why you see those species well studied too. But of course, pied flycatchers are really interesting as well. I'd argue perhaps more interesting than blue tits and great tits.
I would agree with
many reasons. Not least the things picked up, in the book with their more interesting sex life. Other birds have interesting sex lives too, but it's quite well known that male pied flycatchers will quite often have more than one female on the go. And and they're interesting across Europe as well. A lot of people are interested in the sort of sexual selection part, the plumage coloration. I think actually that's one thing you've got in the book as well, the measuring the blackness of the males using this scale, the Droste scale, which people do across Europe. And the male pied flycatchers in the UK are mostly very, very, they're pied flycatchers, they're black and white, the males are black and white. And in the UK, the males are very black and white, whereas as you go across Europe, they tend to get browner. And so there's quite a lot of interest in what drives this colour variation in the males. So that a lot of people have been interested in them, Scandinavia, especially looking at pollution and all sorts of different things.
And then hybridisation.
Yeah, that's right. Hybridisation. Where they overlap in their range with the collared and semi-collared flycatchers. And then, of course, in more recent times, we've been more interested in climate change as well. These long-running data sets, which we weren't thinking about climate change in the 1950s when some of these were started. But of course, now we can actually use that data to see how they've adapted, how they breed earlier than they used to, 2 weeks earlier than the 1950s. So yeah, so it's become really useful information to be able to study those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Some of the first links made between the effects of climate change in birds were made by flycatchers.
Really?
And weren't they from the Netherlands? Yes.
Oh.
So yeah, so they've been so they're great bird to study for many reasons.
Yeah. So I have to ask then. So you've read Odd Bird now. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. It was a real pleasure to send it to you, and I eagerly waited to hear what you think. So please tell me, did it resonate with you?
It did very much. Yeah, I mean, it was a bit of a trip for me, really, because as well as enjoying the book for what it was, of course, I was very, very conscious that the main character was actually quite similar to me in many ways. So I did have to. So it resonated in many ways, including that. And I did have to stop at one point and look back at when you came to visit, what's happened to me in the years since. And it's like, oh well, actually, he couldn't possibly have known that because that happened after he visited. So, the whole book was a bit of a trip for me like that in not knowing what came next. But yes, I mean, it resonated, hugely, especially the empathy I could feel for Dr. Selwood, both sort of scientifically and, I probably won't divulge too much, but there was some romantic things going on there as well, which resonated with me too, from my own experiences in the past. It really did resonate a lot. I was a bit worried about because I don't read books very often. I read plenty of very dry science books and papers, and the flycatcher monograph, of course, I've read. But I struggled to find the time to read outside of work related books. So I was a bit worried about, oh no, I've got to read this book in the next few weeks. How am I going to do that? Normally I only perhaps read a book when I'm on holiday, maybe one book a year. So I was a bit worried that it'd just take me too long to read it, and I'd still be reading it, in a few weeks' time, when it's not really, But it was very easy to read actually, and I managed to find some new time in my in the evenings to do that, and it was great. And in fact, I'm actually now reading another book now, having found this reading time in the evening. I've actually picked up another book. It is still does have a bird theme about it still, but
oh really?
It's good progress for me.
So I think from what you said, your wife is the reader in the family, right?
Yes, and she is reading Odd Bird now. She's reading it. She's just started it.
Oh, fantastic!
Yeah.
Oh, that's really good. Well, yeah. I mean,
it won't take her as long as it took me.
Maybe she'll understand. Maybe wouldn't it be great if she understood you better?
Yeah, it's going to be a very interesting conversation that I have with her. I haven't, I've just said, oh, you've got to read this. You've got to read this. So when did you get started on the flycatcher? What was?
It was an odd. So I was living in North Carolina, and I'd just broken up with a girlfriend, and I was pretty heartbroken, I suppose. And I started to kind of distract myself, I thought I'm gonna make some good out of this. I'm gonna find something good about it, and I'd always wanted to write. So I started going to a creative writing class, and I got some kind of positive feedback about my voice and things. And then I thought, well, what can I write that other people can't write? What's my angle? And I thought, because I'm a PhD in molecular biology, I thought, well, I can write about biological sciences, and then I started thinking about. And maybe because I was trying to recover from this breakup, maybe that was it. Maybe I was trying to understand. And I started to read a book called Mating Games. which is up on my shelf just up there. And I was reading about it, and I really didn't know very much about the parallels between human courtship and birds. And I came across this bird called the pied flycatcher in there, and I read about, I don't know what it was, it's probably a page or a half a page, but of all the, I can't remember any of the other species in the book, but there was something that resonated with me about that bird. And then I was having a career and stuff, and I didn't get started on the novel. And when it came to time to start the novel, I already knew that my protagonist would study the pied flycatcher, and that in some ways his own life would come to parallel. There would be analogies between what was happening in his own life and what was happening in the lives of the birds that he was studying. So it was literally walking into a bookshop and picking up a book and thinking that would do. And then, of course, and I didn't know how widely studied the pied flycatcher was. And then, of course, you start researching and all of this stuff, and then I found myself being interested in it because I wanted to write about it, but also because I just wanted to know about it as well. I just got fascinated in it. And I think the thing about the Alatello and Lundberg monograph is that you sense their affection for the bird too, right? It's a very, I mean, it's not a sentimental book, but you sense their love for what they do and their love for the bird, and I just got really drawn in by that. So that's.
I mean, what one thing that presumably I don't know those authors. Well, one of them's no longer with us.
Yeah.
But I think part of that comes from, which you also pick up on in the book, is the field season. It takes you away from your life for a couple of months, really. It's quite intense.
Yeah.
And that's something that all of us flycatcher researchers across Europe experience every year. I've been doing it for since the late 90s. And my wife almost writes off those 2 months of the year, and that's kind of there in the book as well, isn't it? It's being away for that.
Do you really look forward to that period of the year, knowing that you're going to?
I do and I don't. I mean, I love it when I'm doing it, but it can be a huge amount of work, and it depends how many sort of spin-off projects I've got going on. I mean, I do though. I obviously love it when I'm actually sunny day. I mean, this year was obviously particularly strange because of the COVID situation.
Yeah.
I did get permission to go out still, so it was very strange this year. The weather was fantastic. It's fantastic when everything's going right and have good days, which is a lot of the time. I suppose it is quite a daunting thought as spring comes. It's like, oh, am I ready? Have I got all the equipment here? Have I got enough help? So it's just kind of like decades that you can go and see. I think you're still going to a woodland in another part of Europe. He's going to go somewhere else in the spring, and he's looking forward to that. No, I'm trying to get my children trained up a little bit as well. They're sort of 11 and 13 now, and they show some interest, and they do help me with some aspects of it. They do. I monitor insects, for example, now that I don't think I did in 2013. Maybe
I think you did. You put down bug traps.
Oh yes, I was. Yes.
Yeah.
So still do that. This is trays to collect caterpillar poo, so we got an idea about how abundant the caterpillars are as the spring develops, and flying insects as well with sticky traps. So yes, I've got them sort of trained up in collecting those for me. I have to do those every twice a week. So that's a couple of hours wandering around finding those traps and doing that alone without looking at a bird. So so I'm trying to get my kids involved.
And the novelist in me is immediately starts thinking about writing a book about caterpillar poo. How realistic a depiction is Dr. Selwood, would you say?
I think any behavioural ecologist or would agree No, I think your insights from, I think it applies perhaps more broadly, as you just said, in the sort of science world. Maybe ecologists, have their own sort of take on that, but yeah, no, it definitely, yeah, no, you really nailed it for sure.
Well, it's good. I mean, maybe ecology, because behavioural ecology is somewhat of a solitary site. I mean, all the field work, a lot of the field work. I mean, you say you've got help now, but you spend a lot of time in the field on your own, presumably.
Yeah, well, even with the help, we still work alone. That's just sort of, we still most of the time work alone.
Yeah,
it might be the same wood, but we're not actually with each other.
But you zone it like Simon and Charlotta and Matt and everybody.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's just sort of the efficient way of doing it. Yeah. So it is. Yeah, so it is quite. Yeah, it's. Yeah, I mean, and it's quite a nerdy kind of profession in a way, isn't it? Because it's it tends to be your passion as well. So, you don't necessarily have to be a bird watcher to be behavioural ecologist. Many, if not most, aren't even actually. But you just get in the zone with your study species or whatever.
Yeah.
I wonder if it's. I mean, look, I don't want to dig a hole for myself here, but I think it all resonates perhaps more for male scientists. I think perhaps there's a lot of female behavioural ecologists. So I don't know. So maybe it's a little bit different for women, but certainly from the sort of the bloke scientist perspective, I think it's
I hoped you'd like the novel, although you said that you didn't read very many novels. But I was I thought, I hope he's not going to come back and say you've got all the scientific stuff, the facts about pied flycatchers or bird species. You've got it all wrong. But how did I do? You
did very well indeed. In fact, I'm even more impressed now because earlier in this conversation you mentioned that you didn't take notes, and so that's actually even more impressive. I mean, I haven't studied the sort of the sexual behaviour of pied flycatchers. I'm not so familiar with that literature, which you obviously did go away and research. So there were just two things these are like really minor things that most readers would be totally oblivious to. So one of them was so this was when obviously based when you came round with me and all those things, and it was all captured carefully. And then the last thing that was done was putting the ring on the bird.
Yeah,
and it's always done first.
Is it?
And the reason for that is, well, a lot of the birds already have a ring, but because of the identity of the bird is so important very often, but there's always a chance of that. So, I mean, this is any kind of like bird ringing kind of activity. It's always the first thing you do is check to see if it's got a ring. If it has, you write the number down, or if it hasn't, you put a ring on. And then that bird, even if it's escaped, it's got a number on it. You can put a unique tag on it. So I mean, of course, that'd be only a bird ringer would have spotted that. Of course, it's not a scientific error at all.
I can live with that. I can live with
it. Exactly. Yeah. And one other thing I noticed as well, I think at one point you referred to the eggs being greenish.
Did I?
I think so. They're turquoise.
Right. Yeah.
That's it. Other than that, I can't.
Do you know? I was reading. I went through. I picked up Red 67, the book which you've contributed to. I picked it up yesterday. I think I saw it, but also I was thinking kind of in preparation for our call, and I read your the piece that you wrote again, and I read through it, and I thought you described the egg colour in that, and I thought I had a sudden jolt, and I thought, I hope that's the colour that I used in the book capturing. What's your specific research interest with respect to the pied flycatcher? Yeah,
so I suppose there's sort of two things. One thing I've done a lot actually since you visited, just probably starting that time, and that is finding out where they go in Africa, because as we discussed, they're extremely well studied throughout their breeding range in Europe. But these birds migrate to sub-Saharan Africa each year, and despite the millions that have been ringed over the decades, only a tiny number are caught the other side of the Sahara Desert. I think it's just 12 out of the millions right across Europe, only 6 of those in the UK. So we've got very, very little information about where they go. And part of my job at the RSPB is to understand what causing their decline, what drives their populations. And of course, we're missing a massive part of their life. And we need to, while we know they go to some birds are going to a pretty small area, Western Africa, centered around Guinea, Sierra Leone, Liberia. And I've ended up going to Liberia and seeing pied flycatchers there, which is really, which is a very special thing to do, actually.
Yeah.
We now know they do in a single non-stop flight, which takes 36 hours. So that's night and day. So, incredible feat for a bird that only weighs 12 grams.
Yeah.
We've got a good idea about the route they take to get there as well. They stop in Spain and Portugal for 2 weeks at the end of August. And they migrate much quicker in the spring. So we've learned an awful lot about that. And that's all, most of that was new information. And the other element is this link with climate change, looking at how climate change affects them, because climate change makes springs earlier and warmer earlier in the spring. And because pied flycatchers, they only have one nesting attempt, so they have to time that just right, so that the peak demand of the hungry nestling coincides with when there's this short peak in insects, caterpillars and flying insects, which is why I now monitor the number of caterpillars from their poo and the flying insects. That's when we know when this sharp peak is in the availability of this food. So they have to time their nests to match that, which means they need to breed earlier now than they used to. And it's a lot of my work been looking at that. And in fact, this is one way when I had to look to see the date of your visit, because in the book, the Dr Selwood has a Nature paper which I get very excited about. And after your visit, I didn't have a Nature paper, but I had a paper on this mismatch in Nature, Ecology and Evolution, which is published by Nature. It's not quite Nature, but it's a very good journal on mismatch. So there's a coincidence there as well.
Well, and congratulations on that. I mean, it's a great achievement. And how are the, I know they are part of the Red 67. I mean, how are they doing?
Well, actually, in the last 5 years or so, they have declined by about 50% since the 1990s. Actually, over the last 5 or so years, the population has levelled off. Actually, it's in the UK. So they're not. The decline isn't continuing. It has levelled off, and we have seen perhaps more favourable springs and weather for them in the last 5 or so years. And the population in East Dartmoor Woods, where you came and visited, and that population has actually been increasing. And this year we had 98 pairs across the reserve there, which is the most we've ever had there. And the year before was very good as well. So I think in the southwest, we talked about the kind of European network of more academic researchers. In the southwest, I organised a southwest-based, more UK-based network, which links citizen scientists mostly, people who monitor nest box schemes in woodlands, right across the southwest of England, and they're collecting a lot of the same kind of information in a pretty standard way. So all that information I pulled together in this network as well, and increasingly that data is now also pumped into this sort of European bits of research. And what it's done is, these are all nest box populations, so it's kind of driven an interest in providing nest boxes in suitable woodlands for them. Yeah. So these nest box schemes, really do. They're taken up very rapidly by them, and it does seem to be increasing the population at our local level. But obviously there's other things going on as well. But that's one of the things I'm interested in doing some research on at the moment. It's one thing I am doing a little bit of at the moment is working out, where, if there's, I think in good years they produce a bit, I haven't proven or written this up in the paper yet, but the feeling I have is that in good years when they fledge lots of young, they migrate and come back the next year, and they can only sort of breed. They don't always breed when they're 1 year old. They very often don't enter the breeding population until they're 2 or even 3. So there's obviously a lot of competition going on there in each year, and there's quite a lot of birds that don't breed. It's very hard to know how many of these non-breeding birds there are in the population. I suspect that from a few good years of productivity, there's quite a lot of these non-breeding birds. So it means that it kind of buffers them in a bad year.
Yeah.
Where survival is low, which we have seen in recent years. Adult survival has been low in some of the recent years, but the population size has stayed the same. I think it's these, it's providing opportunities for these non-breeding birds to enter the population. So I think there's a lot of this going on that is driving the population trends as well.
Yeah, can you tell me a bit more about the kind of Red 67 project as well? That's a very interesting one, and I absolutely, I actually haven't got my copy of the book just here beside me, but yes, the Red 67.
I've got it here.
I mean, it's such a good cause, and it's a beautiful book as well. I mean, the artwork in it alone is just it's fantastic. So you've obviously been involved in that, and the idea is to raise funds and awareness, presumably.
That's right. Yeah. So the 67. So these are birds that are on the red list of conservation concern in the UK. So this list is revised periodically. So these are the sort of birds that are experiencing declines that we need to be looking after more and figuring out the reasons for that. It's a very diverse group of it's all sorts of birds, from waders and seabirds, lots of small birds, lots of migrant birds are in there, and so there's loads of different causes of decline that lots of different things going on. So this Red 67 book was actually the idea of a chap called Kit, who one of these people I only knew from Twitter. He I think his handle was Yellow Birder, and he found 67 artists and 67 writers, a mixture of more established, well-known artists and writers who contributed to this. But I think the nice thing was using getting people involved who were just sort of passionate about that species, whether they were a researcher or whether they were had any particular attachment to these species. So it's quite a random collection in many ways. But the artist stuff is particularly amazing, from established and non-established artists. It's amazing the talent out there. And actually, that's one thing. You talk about behavioural ecologists and how typical they are. It's always amazed me how many of them I definitely don't fall in this category, but a lot of them are actually very talented artists.
Yeah.
Some of the art you've seen there are actually from behavioural ecologists.
Yeah. Well, and Chris Packham.
Yes. Yeah.
Chris
Packham. There's some top writers in there. Yeah, Nick Baker and Amy
but he did one of the illustrations as well, didn't he, Chris Packham?
He did. Yeah. And Chris Packham was the only one who did an illustration and the writing.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, it was and it was massively successful. So it was published by the BTO, and then the profits are shared between the BTO and the RSPB. And of the first print run, sold out within a week of it arriving. They've reprinted it twice more, I think. So you can still get it, but it was hugely successful.
Yeah, well, it's good. I will be kind of, I've done a little bit on Twitter about it myself, just letting people know and trying to spread the word, because I do think it's a great initiative.